what happens. Because I don't have
All
it
right.
up in the browser. Let's just hope that we're going live. I
take it
assume we are.
we'll see the chat and everything here, right?
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
should be on the right-hand side there. You got it.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can see us yet, but hopefully. Beautiful. Oh. I just realised I do in fact have the stream going on in another tab, so that was a bit weird. I've got some background going on. Patton, the Apple Gamer, hello, how are you? Welcome. This is the live stream. This is the pre-show for Scary Fast, and I have a guest with me today. So let me introduce Sigmund Judge from Magic Rays of Light on Apple Podcasts, ScreenTimes.net, and recent tvOS 17 review for Mac Stories. Sigmund, how are you, mate?
I am good. This is weird, right? This is
It
weird.
is.
An evening event for us. But this also means that there'll be a lot of people watching this time who would normally be at work during typical 10 a.m. Pacific start, which means they're going to be able to watch the show or probably be making their way home from work to be able to get there in time. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people probably on the road listening to the audio from this event. So obviously, this is, I guess, what is it, 4 p.m. now in California, and it would be 7 p.m. in New York. I don't know where everyone is. Daisy, hello, lovely to have you here. So yeah, I think all bets are off for this one because there's nothing that you can kind of say which is like, oh well, they always do X, Y, or Z when they have an event. They've thrown all of that out the window already. It's very strange, and nobody was really expecting the event until literally 2 days before the invitations dropped this time, which is just bizarre. And I put up a little thing on Twitter about how things happen before these events and how kind of the event drops and then everyone has their ideas about what's coming, and then a couple of days before the event it kind of everyone comes together on what we're expecting. But this time stuff's been changing right up till today, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy week, right, for Apple news in general. So there will be things that I think may have come to the forefront that got lost in translation, maybe, or just never got to the particular sources. But let's talk about what is expected tonight, because I think if you're a Mac lover from in terms of Apple, right? This is it, right? Your M3, the night of the M3, or at least that's what we're expecting. Do you
Yeah,
want to
and
tell us a
weirdly,
little bit about
not
everything?
just M3, it seems like M3 and M3 Pro and M3 Max in one go potentially, which is again unheard of.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a little bit skeptical of all three chips. But
Hmm.
now
So
the interesting, I was going to say,
go on.
sorry, the interesting thing for those that um, don't know me, I cover Apple on a media and kind of like service and presentation um, those elements of Apple, right? When it comes to chips and die and all of this, this is the man I tune into. So in terms of chipsets and what we can expect and what that actually means for, I don't know if we are past now the average consumer, so to speak. What are you expecting, and what are you expecting that to mean? I think in general.
Yeah. So the M3 itself is obviously, as far as we're aware, going to be the first Apple Mac chip that's based on the 3 nanometer process, which basically means it should be about a 40% improvement before they actually make any changes in terms of the design itself. They just shrink everything down. Electrons don't have to go as far. You don't need to use as much energy, which means you can either be 40% more efficient or you can be 40% faster and keep the same efficiency. So for the M3 itself, they normally go for a balance, so it'll be around about 20% on both sides. we expect. It looks like the M3 is going to have the same kind of layout in terms of cores, so 4 performance, 4 efficiency, and 10 GPU cores in like the full fat chips. There will probably be some binned versions as well. So with disabled GPU cores, most likely they don't seem to disable any CPU cores in the majority of cases.
Mm.
But then moving up to the M3 Pro and the M3 Max, if they follow the same pattern that we've had in the past, obviously we're going to have a lot more CPU and GPU cores. The Max chip is kind of what they make on the die, and then they chop off about half of the GPU cores to make the Pro chips. So that would be the chips where most of the errors have been in that segment of the GPUs. Then that's the ones that they'll chop up, and then the rest where there's less issues, those are the ones that get binned or get put through to the full fat Max chips. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I guess before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you're expecting, right? I bought an M1 Max Pro, um, up the RAM to what I thought was sufficient, 32, right? That's
Hmm.
what I went with. In fact, yeah, I've got the Max chip, right? So if every year we're seeing increases, what would that mean to, I guess, someone like ourselves that are in media, and because from your perspective, I know you run on a MacBook Air, right, based
Hmm.
on your videos, right? So comparing like a MacBook Air and what you're able to do with the MacBook Air and what we have been able to do with the M1 and now what we're able to do with the M3, are we literally just talking about um how do I put it? Are we literally just talking about efficiency at this point? Um
Well, I mean, not particularly. It's interesting because if you look at the A17 Pro that's just come out in the latest iPhones, that is almost exactly the same performance as M1.
okay.
It's crazy how quickly that's improved. So that's in terms of benchmarking, it sits about the same power, the same sort of performance, but at much less power consumption. Whereas with the M series chips, these are the ones that are getting more and more powerful. So although I would do all of my work on a MacBook Air and have no dramas with it, I also don't do particularly complex video editing. I tend to stick to 1080p, and that's mainly because I actually just need to be able to get the videos out and processed as quickly as possible because
Sure.
I'm normally doing news content. I tried doing it in 4K for a while, and it does take at least 4 times as long for YouTube to do its gubbins on the other side, by which point someone else might have got a video out. So I'm more than
Okay.
happy to go with the easier stuff. If you want to do serious video editing, you want to have multiple layers, if you want to have, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers on your timeline, which I know that a lot of creators do, or you want to do more cinematic LUTs or different kind of filters on what you're doing, then you are going to probably want to go for one of those MacBook Pros. You're also going to have more dedicated media engines, which are there to help with that export. And you can basically do all of your rendering in the background, which will speed up then the export times, which I keep switched off on the MacBook Air and keep that nice battery life. So it just hits those performance cores only when I'm exporting.
Okay. Um I recognize a name here. Amjad Khan says, "Hey both," otherwise known as Apple Watcher on Twitter or
Oh, hi,
X or
Amjad.
whatever
How
it's
are you?
called this week. And I think he's pretty local to you, Dave.
Oh,
So
cool.
there we go. So small world. Thank you for
Yeah.
joining. Um, do you want to get into questions now, or you tell me?
Yeah,
You're
let's hit up the chat and see what's going on in there. So, Patton, the Apple gamer, is saying I'm going to be getting the MacBook Pro 16 next year. But if Apple do a regular MacBook and it comes in yellow, I think I would get that coming away from a MacBook Air M1. Now, I really hoped that when the M2 MacBook Airs came out, we were going to get some really funky colors. I was hoping that they would go down the route that they did with the iMacs and kind of give us the iBook kind of clamshell colors. But that wasn't to be, obviously. We ended up with our midnight, and that was about it. But how about you? What are you actually running at the moment, Sigmund?
So I've got a couple of computers. I have an M2 Mac Mini, which I'm currently running. I have a M1 14-inch MacBook Pro Max chip. And then honestly, for a lot of my capture, because what I do most of the time is capture Apple TV, which we'll get into in a little bit. And for most of that now, because of iOS 17, I'm able to do that with a couple of extra adapters and ways of getting past certain restrictions. I'm plugging that all into an iPad Mini and
Wow.
getting my captures that way, which means I have like a portable rig. Which, yes, I am that crazy person that takes an Apple TV with me wherever I go. So yeah, that's what I'm running. I've got to be honest and say, as excited as I always am for technology and the continued what's the word? I'm getting stuck on words because it is late.
It is.
But the you know the come on, help me out, Dave.
Or just the stuff that you need versus the stuff that you just kind of want to play with.
Right. I'm always interested in the evolution of what's next within technology and computing, because I think when you think about apps and your general experience on Apple devices, you're thinking about the affordability of being able to, first off, produce those experiences for someone, right? And then also, computers have come a long way. I remember my first experience of seeing a Mac, right? And it was specifically for Logic, and it was this very expensive thing. And I remember being at college, and everyone was just like, "Oh my god, like I better not break this thing." And that's
Hmm.
what it was back then. Now to see how far Apple has come as a company, and to be able to have something as little, and I don't want to kind of underscore the thing, the underscore the price of like $900. It's still a lot of money, but in comparison to where we were in my lifetime, um say what 20 years ago, it is pretty incredible. um so I'm excited for that, but I'm also excited in the gaming aspect, which I think we're going to get something quite heavy. Um, uh, yeah, it's an aspect that I think is going to play quite heavy in this event.
Hmm.
One of the reasons for the time difference, I think, also because as we said, right now it's coming up to 4:15 in California. It's coming up to 11:15 in the UK, just past midnight in Central Europe. But in Japan, we are at 8:15 in the morning.
We
And
sure are.
just recently, Tim Cook went to China to try and repair some relationships, especially within that industry. Um, we don't know what happened. We just know he was there. And normally with these kind of things, especially with a big company, you've got an ace up your sleeve. Um, we already know there are partnerships in place with Capcom and Konami. Um, we've seen that already, alongside Ubisoft as well, during the iPhone event that's just been the last month. And we've had surprises across the gaming strategy throughout the year, to the point where I think only now we're catching up as people who are going, okay, Apple and gaming. This is a thing now that we actually need to start uh, justifying rumors to and talking about. Um, how impressed are you with the gaming story, and what do you expect at this
So
event?
yeah. So obviously we've heard all of the stuff about Japan. If we look back at WWDC and the Apple iPhone event that we just had, WWDC, we got the game porting toolkit, we got game mode for Sonoma. The last iPhone event, we got hardware ray tracing coming to the A17, which it looks like they were trying to put into the previous generation, and we're having some heat issues, which is why it's been delayed till this year. I think there's definitely something to this. The events that they've put on for this particular Apple event, the kind of in-person stuff, they're taking small groups of influencers to places that are not around Cupertino. They've got one in New York, one in Mexico City that we know of. There could be some more.
Mhm.
And I think they might be. I know they send out snacks and AirPods Maxes to several people as well. I feel like there might be some sort of gaming thing going on afterwards where they have like a gaming play session to kind of give people a look at these new titles or whatever it may be. There have been rumors that Apple could maybe be acquiring some sort of gaming company from Japan. I know the ones that you've noted down here: Capcom, Konami, Sony, and one that I can definitely not say because I just can't pronounce that one.
Hideo Kojima, the
Kojima, that's the one.
Hideo Kojima, the mastermind behind Metal Gear Solid series, who previously was at Konami. Death Stranding is his baby. But
Cool.
that came out in 2019, and he did say the first time it was introduced at WWDC that this was the first of many projects
Yeah.
of a bludgeoning relationship. So
Yeah. So I think it's really exciting. I would love to see like some sort of gaming controller first party from Apple, because that's one thing that we haven't seen in the past. They've done Xbox controllers and PlayStation controllers, and obviously they're very good. You know, they're already developed, they've had plenty of time. Other than Pippin, I don't think Pippin controllers are still compatible.
my yeah, you're going back some there with the
You
Pippin.
know I love my vintage Apple.
Indeed. Um yeah, I'm not too sure about a controller. I do think we'll see some Mac accessories this year. This event, I should say. Obviously, everything's moved to USB Type C, but there is one accessory that we've never had before, which I'd love to see. And maybe this could be paired with some desktop Macs, which we'll get into in a second. But isn't it a bummer that none of these Magic keyboards are backlit? And yet, the mainstay, and I almost feel like the characteristic of Macs was always the backlit keyboards that everyone else caught up with. And then we got the keyboards that were backlit that Apple never made and everyone else did.
Yep. You know what though? Just putting a couple of things together in my head while we're talking about gaming. People love a bit
Sorry.
of RGB if they're gaming. Maybe we're going to get RGB backlit Magic keyboards with like lighting
Oh,
effects. I mean, it's
do
so
it.
not Apple at all, but I would love it.
I was thinking in terms of the gaming,
Hmm.
could we see the return of the touch bar in a gaming experience?
I mean, it's
Probably
certainly
not.
possible, and there have been some patents, I think, for Apple keyboards where the key caps are essentially mini OLED displays individually, so you can reconfigure the whole keyboard. So, like, you could individually light and put different legends onto things for different games. It would also, of course, be very useful for things like Final Cut or Logic, where you want to be able to have all of your different tools on that keyboard. That would be super configurable. It would probably cost as much as a Mac, but it does sound pretty cool.
And I also think it could maybe bring in some kind of form of accessibility, which is always been a focus. If we're talking about an Apple first party game controller and the possibility of that, it's going to do something that other controllers haven't. And to their credit, PlayStation is just about to bring out their full access controller for people that need motor um, uh, with different
Assistance.
motors and different accessories and assistants. Right? Microsoft have done it a long time ago. Jody says on the chat, 128 gigabyte RAM multiples would sure help with gaming. Now,
I think that's 12 gig
oh,
RAM
I'm
multiples.
sorry,
Yeah.
12 gig. How would that help?
So we've already been hearing that the 12 gig modules have been a lot more popular in the production. So yeah, it just means that rather than getting the 8 gig base models that we've been having for the M series chips so far, and obviously bearing in mind that these RAM chips are pretty much mated to the to the actual chip, which is why they're so quick in terms of swap between the hard drives, the SSDs, and using the RAM as well, which is why they kind of perform so well on lower levels of RAM. The idea that we'd be moving up to 12 as the base sounds like a really useful idea, to be fair. I think the 12 gig modules have been used in a lot of Snapdragon processors. Apple hasn't moved over to those yet because basically the iPhones are really good at managing the memory compared to a lot of the Android systems. But yeah, I can definitely see this being a really nice step up, especially if they are, because remember as well, the RAM, the unified memory, unified basically means that it's shared between the GPU and the CPU, and having that extra available for the graphics, if you're talking about gaming, is going to be a big help.
Very cool. I'll be honest, my gaming is mainly on Apple TV, but I'm excited about these console games being repackaged and put on the App Store, which is what Apple always wanted, right? We've had
Hmm.
the streaming service from Xbox, and they've brought it in through a web app, but that's not really what they wanted, because it was in conflict with Apple's idea of prepackaged games and everything being a separate app. Do you think we could see? Obviously, we've seen this already with Capcom, with Ubisoft, with Konami. Do you think we could see a player like Sony, for example, follow suit? And I say this because they seem to be quite happy to do that with their high profile games on PC.
So, in terms of bringing those games over to the Mac and bringing them to iOS, or are we talking about doing their own kind of streaming service?
Well, this is where I'm conflicted because I think we're going to see something at some point from Sony bringing games to iOS. I don't know if that's going to happen and Mac. I don't know if that's going to happen at this event, because it might be in conflict with their streaming service, which launches today in North America for
Mm.
PS5 games. But I definitely think there's something there. There's something to it.
I think there's probably a decent chance that, given Apple announced this game porting toolkit at WWDC, what we might see a lot of today is publishers that have used this game porting toolkit and are bringing their games natively to the Mac and to iOS. That's probably what I would hope we're going to see, as well as obviously some new hardware, because the new hardware is the bit that I get really excited for. I'd love to see some of these systems. I don't think that they're going to look much different to what we have already, because if they were going to have any sort of physical redesigns, then they would have people in California at Cupertino so that they can do the hands-on afterwards, get the press photos, all that kind of thing. The
Sure.
only thing we might get is color changes. And I think the iMac is actually a really good candidate for that.
Let's talk about the iMac.
Let's.
I love the colors, and
Mhm.
what I love about the iMac and its reintroduction. What we're talking a couple of years ago now, right? Or more.
Mhm.
3 years? 3 years has it been?
I think it's been about 500 and some days, because it was a spring
Okay.
launch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I loved how they were presented to the world. It really kind of harked back to there was a period in time where Apple really embraced the retro feel and got everyone back in, and obviously that culminated with the MacBook Pro chassis that we have today. But the iMac is a very special computer. Of course, we haven't had the iMac Pro yet. I don't know if we're getting that now.
I
No.
don't think we're ever getting it.
Okay. Interesting.
Mm.
A bit like how we've got the Macs, uh, what is it? The Mac, the Mac Studio, sorry.
Mhm.
Bit like we've got that as the replacement, right? You
Yeah.
think we're just gonna, and in which case, are we gonna at least get that black iMac that we want?
Well, there are hints that we could. So, if you cast your mind back to when the iPhone 15 rumors were in full swing, we had a lot of braided cables being leaked, which people were thinking were going to come with the Pro iPhones and be color matched. And they were not. You get the white cable in the box as usual, USB-C to USB-C. However, the colors included a black cable.
Mhm.
Now, the iMacs come with a braided cable that is color matched right now, but it's a lightning one. Now we're moving over to USB-C to USB-C, and we're going to hopefully get these new peripherals, which will all match. And if we've got black there, maybe we're going to get a dark mode iMac, which would fit really nicely with the colors that we've just seen in the event invitations as well. What better than to do a dark mode iMac launch and maybe even black MacBook Pros at an event that's in the evening? I don't know. It kind of fits for me.
I like it. I like it.
Mm,
I hope that's what we get, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, oh, a little bit worried because I don't really need another Mac, and that might just push my button.
that's not true,
Probably
Sigmund.
not because yeah, probably not because I'm saving for the Vision Pro. Um, okay, Patton the Apple Gamer says it's been 900 days, so yeah, just short of three
I'm not
years.
sure that's true.
Okay.
I
Well,
think it was 2021, but let me just double check that.
um, and Double P says iPad Mini 7 plus iPad 11 equals new hover pencil feature. That's what the new pencil was about. Doesn't need pressure because it's more for jotting notes, doodling, signing PDFs, which is interesting to me because I got to say, my favorite iPad of all time is the iPad Mini. And
Yeah,
this current iPad Mini, I know people have said stuff about the jelly roll on the screen. It's not something that I've noticed on a day to day. I think it's something you have to almost slow your camera down and look, it shouldn't do it.
yeah.
Sorry, Sam, and I love Sam Cole, but I think he's wrong on this one. Um, now
You know what?
I'd
I was
love.
wrong. It's 913 days since the iMac was released.
There we go.
That's crazy.
I thought it'd been a while because actually we've had a generation of Apple TV between the Apple TV that was launched during that event as well. So yeah, I thought it'd been a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, time goes fast. And so will this event. How fast do you think it's going to be? And how scary do you think it's going to be? Who's going to dress up? Are we going to get a good evening with fangs and Tim Cook turning into a bat? Let's have some fun
I
here.
I can't see Tim Cook dressing up. That's the one person I think at Apple that I can't imagine. I think you'd be hard pressed to get him to dress like in anything other than what he normally says. I'd be surprised if he can even move away from "Good morning." Maybe because he's speaking directly to Japan. But I think Craig is definitely a candidate for dressing up. I think we could get some real Craig memes from this. That electric guitar from the last one was fabulous from Dub Dub.
Mhm.
But yeah, I could definitely see Craig in full Halloween gear for this.
So you think we're going to see Craig during this event? Because unless there's a big software story, I don't expect to see him. I think we'll see Turnus. Yeah.
I think there is, like, if we're talking about gaming, that's software.
Okay.
That makes the
Very
most
cool.
sense, and really pushing on that gaming, the game porting toolkit, and how Macs, how Macs have come so far since Apple Silicon's launched. Because I think if we're looking at the M3 Macs in terms of benchmarking, it looks like it's going to be there and thereabouts with the latest Intel chips, like the 13900K, which is about as quick as you can get on the Intel side at this point. I think it's going to pretty much rival that now.
I'm so in the Apple universe. Intel feels
Yeah,
almost
they're the really warm ones,
yeah. Which
little space
we're
heaters.
getting into October. The heating's going up.
Mm.
I kind of miss my Intel Mac for that reason. Uh,
Keeping a vintage Mac Pro under the desk with the Xeons just to keep your feet warm.
there we go. There we go. Yeah, should have never got rid of it. Um, um, yeah. So, do you think this is going to be a fast event? And if so, how fast?
I,
'Cause-
in general, with the all digital events, which this is kind of all digital, technically, even though they've got people in places, they tend to be around about the hour mark, I think. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to be around about an hour, maybe 70 minutes. Um,
Mm.
I am planning to jump back on and do some more streaming afterwards, but it probably won't be for very long because it's going to be very, very tired by then. Very tired in the UK. But yeah, I think I definitely think it's going to be over an hour, like, because otherwise they'd just release the individual product videos. I think there's got to be something crazy good because otherwise I'm not really sure why we're here.
I will just say, there's been a lot of speculation with those packages going to certain influencers, right? With
Hmm.
the AirPods Max and the snacks. For anyone that's not aware, you can't hear me.
No, I was just saying I didn't get any.
Oh, well, you've got your own. It's fine. Um, you, unless you got 4 ears,
I only got little ones.
there we go. But I think something that is often overlooked is if you watch the event instead of on YouTube, watch it in the TV app, because you get 4K HDR and you get spatial audio sound, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of.
I was not,
Um,
and now I'm
so
going to change my stream that
there,
I'm preparing to watch.
there we go.
Okay, done.
Um, yeah, it's been like that for a few years now. So there might not be more to it than that. There's a really interesting post here that actually touches upon something that I asked you in our little chat before this live stream.
Yes.
Obviously, everyone is excited for Apple Vision Pro. This is our kind of last chance at maybe getting a taste of Apple Vision Pro for the year before what will no doubt be the pre-launch event next year. Do you
Yes.
think we're going to see anything? And as Double P mentions here, Apple TV shows and movies, right?
Hmm.
On November 1st is the 4th anniversary of Apple TV Plus and Apple Originals.
Ooh. So, do we think we're going to see something from Vision? I don't know if it's going to get any real mention. However, if we are going to see M3, I
Mm.
have a very, very strong feeling that the Vision is not going to be released with an M2 inside it. I think it's definitely going to have an M3 by that point, especially if it's going to have that ray tracing technology, which is just perfect for graphical stuff. Um, there may be a mention of, and of course, we'll be putting M3 into Vision Pro as well. That's the kind of mention that it might get, bringing this graphics improvements before it launches. I think that's potential because I think that ray tracing could be something that developers will then be able to build into their apps. In terms of the sort of immersion stuff with Vision Pro, oh, we have an update in the chat. The Apple Store is finally down.
I just
That has
saw.
been controversial all day because everyone was confused that we wouldn't be able to buy things today, but we can spend our money. How kind of Apple. So that's 30 minutes before the event that this has happened. Maybe they've got better at updating it. Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of the sort of Halloween aspect, I mean, obviously Apple can't release stuff now for the Vision Pro to be sort of like some sort of horror experience that would be going on inside it, but by next year, that would be quite intense, I would imagine. Horror movies in full on VR.
Yeah. Yeah. Half man, half tech, who has sent you a super sticker,
Oh, thank you, Half Man
um,
Half Tech.
has put here new Apple Silicon Apple TV. I
Wow.
would love to see that become a reality. Do I think it's coming anytime soon? No, but you have a different view on this one, Dave.
Yeah, so obviously we've always in the past we've had A series chips in the Apple TV, and I don't think that that's going to change. I don't think we're going to be moving on to M series chips in there. I know a lot of people have suggested it, but remember the A series chips are still Apple Silicon. The first Apple Silicon was the A4, which came in the original iPad and the
Mm.
iPhone 4. But the A17, as we've mentioned already in this call, has basically got the same compute power as an M1, but it's also got that ray tracing engine. And we also know with Apple TV, this is quite important. Apple TV only ever has to power one display, which is different from what we have with the Macs with an M series chip. So all of that performance is potentially doing one up to 4K display. I think that an
Mhm.
A17 in an Apple TV would be very, very capable. And we know that that A17 Pro can run these Resident Evil games, which Apple was touting for the iPhone 15 Pro. I think that's a realistic thing that they could, paired with a decent controller. That's a reasonably good. And in fact, I was having a look at the actual compute power. The A17 is about, I think it was 88% of the performance of a PlayStation 5 in terms of the CPU, which is pretty bloomin' close.
Mhm. Yeah,
I'd go with that.
very much so. Um, I'm looking at our notes, and
Mhm.
I do want to talk about actually something that is in the chat, right? And that is with regard to the Apple's media services going up in price. We've seen that across the board. I am an Apple One Premier subscriber. I share
Me
it with
too.
my family. Family sharing, let me just say, is something that Apple have had so much foresight in. Um,
Hmm.
when you're looking at the likes of Disney and Netflix and others trying to kind of claw back that money by almost convicting their customers before they've done anything bad. Um, this is the direction I'm really happy Apple went, and that's why I will continue to pay that money. And that money is now going towards, first off, paying publications better on Apple News, um, Apple News Plus. Writers are now getting a better deal when it comes to TV shows. Hopefully, in the next day or so, the SAG
SAG-AFTRA.
AFTRA strike will
Yeah.
be over. Um, there are all positive points here on actually having people be able to live on the wage that they get from creating the things that entertain us and fulfill our lives.
Hmm.
So a little bit extra, I think, is fine. There's a really good question with regard to triple A games on arcade. Obviously, we are talking gaming.
Yes.
This is where I think Sony and their new cloud streaming service that's coming, which they've been very coy on, even with their own streaming hardware that's coming out next month that works in tandem with the PS5. Um, have been very, very quiet on. And I do wonder if that might be some kind of partnership that could work in tandem with Apple's services and maybe add a little bit more value. But I
Interesting.
don't see the AAA games coming to our Apple Arcade. I think it's a different service.
I'm not 100% sure. It's a really tricky one because when Arcade launched, basically everything had to be playable on all of the platforms. You had to be able to. I think there was a requirement that you had to be able to play it with the Apple TV remote when we had that awful one with the glass surface on top, which had the accelerometers built into it and all sorts before we went back to the aluminium design. I think there was a requirement that everything had to be playable on that, even if it wasn't a great experience. And now there's certainly quite a few games for Apple TV in the arcade which do require a game controller. Um, but I would say I think there's room for some of these higher end games. I think some of the stuff like the NBA games look great on Apple TV, really, really well done. Um, Obviously, there was things like I think it was Fantasian, which was just an incredibly beautifully made game. There's some really, really good stuff on there. And then there's some really weird like Fruit Ninja Plus and some just
Which
random like
I love.
solitaire with no adverts, and you're just like, "Oh, this is a strange mixture." I was a little bit sad when the which one was it I used to play? The Transformers game. I really enjoyed that one, and then it went off of the arcade and became a transaction minefield, so I stopped playing it.
Mm,
But I really enjoyed that, and I used to play it with the kids and stuff, and we all enjoyed it together. But yeah, I don't know. I can't see that Apple would build the Sony thing into uh, Apple One or Apple Arcade because it just, especially if it remains a third party. Obviously,
mm.
there are rumors that they might be doing some sort of acquisition that they're announcing. I don't imagine that Apple has bought Sony without anyone knowing. Um,
No.
Disney probably, but Sony absolutely not. Uh, you know,
If you look at Sony as a company, right, everyone thinks of them for the entertainment, for the hardware and everything else. They're in control of like the biggest payment system, which is
oh,
basically
really?
what Apple duplicated, right, with Apple
Ah,
Pay, right? Um, so Sony as like a financial company, is probably their biggest asset
ah.
beyond the technology side of
And Apple
things.
does seem to want to move into being their own financial services, especially
Mhm.
since Goldman Sachs are trying to abandon ship and they're potentially talking about maybe going over to American Express. I think Apple's going to do their own financial stuff very, very soon. Because I mean, if anyone can underwrite debt, it's Apple. They've probably got more in the bank than most banks.
Yeah. Oh dear. We literally have 15 minutes. I want to see
We are
very
getting
quickly
close.
on the TV app if normally about 10 minutes before, but there is a trick. You have to restart the Apple TV app
Oh,
because otherwise you get stuck on that 15-second preview, which
where do I
normally
find it in the TV app? I'm
okay,
I'm
so
on Mac TV app here.
okay. Well, it's going to be in the
Watch now.
same spot, but I should say I use a US account mainly for these reasons because you don't normally see the preview show up in the UK TV app until probably about half hour before. But if we go to the TV app and we go on Watch Now, you literally go down from your up next queue to the next row, which is your Apple event row, and you click
Okie
in,
dokie.
and let's see, we are live. So this is the live preview that's going to carry on until the moment when everything gets a little bit
spooky.
You had to use it, didn't you? You had to
I
use it
did.
eventually.
You knew it.
So yeah, Scary Fast is not showing up on the UK version
Yet. But what I'd say is you have to restart the TV app
Okay.
and then look. And I guarantee it'll be up there. That's the trick.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Restarting. Watch now. Apple event. Scarily fast. You're right. How?
I know.
Why has Apple managed to be so inconsistent this year? It's definitely called Scary Fast on the invitations, and this now says Scarily Fast. They don't know what their own event's called.
Oh, it says Scary Fast for me.
Yeah, mine definitely says Scarily Fast. Maybe that's the UK version.
Let's have a look.
Maybe we get actual grammar in the UK.
This is great YouTube, isn't it?
Yes. This is what people come to my channel for. It's for the nitty gritty.
Scarily fast.
Scarily fast. How confusing.
Okay.
Who knows what's going on?
I'm going back to Scary Fast.
I'll turn down that music before we get copyright struck.
It's almost like that I can't believe it's not Dairy Lee kind of thing, isn't it? I can't believe it's not Scarily. No, because it's Scary Fast.
Scarily.
Sorry. Can you tell it's getting closer to midnight?
It is, isn't it?
Hairs are starting to grow on my palms.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just have a quick look here at the chat. Phil Gilligan is saying it's Scarily Fast in Southport in the UK. If everyone can let us know what the title is, where they're watching from, that will be absolute classic YouTube content.
I think he just means it's Scarily Fast in Southport. It's Scarily Fast in Croydon as well. Let me just say. It's scary in Croydon.
Scary in Croydon, yeah. Just lock the doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, let's see. Who else? Let's have a quick look back in the chat and see what's going on. I've now got full screen going on the big old display up here. So yeah, we've got any idea on UK prices, says Patton the Apple Gamer. I'm guessing, like in general, Apple seems to have realigned now, where the dollar price and the pound price is basically the same. And everyone has always criticized this because obviously the pound is worth a little bit more than the dollar. But we have to remember as well that ours includes sales tax and the Americans does not. So sales tax gets added at checkout in the US, not over here.
And you've got import fees as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
there's not, which, I mean, they're all shipping from China anyway, and Vietnam and all the other places now, which is great that they're kind of diversifying it a bit. But that's probably why Tim had to pop over and say sorry to China. What else have we got down here? Robert Berry saying, "Oh yes, it is." I think that's because of your pantomime voice. I would assume.
Oh,
Scarily fast on Safari in the East Midlands, says Wayne, and
there we go.
scarily fast in Scotland. Yeah, so Pat the Gamer cannot believe it's not butter. Yeah, all good. So I
I'm so
think this
glad
is
everyone got the reference.
absolutely. I mean, this is good fun. I think having this kind of change up, it's just grabbed so much more attention than these events would have done normally. I think because nobody knows what to expect now. I
Hmm.
think Apple's made a really good move here.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely, and I also think it's the perfect time as well. Did you notice how, like, for example, the price increases for the media services, that news got dwarfed really by Mark Gurman's reporting on the TV app, and then the event, and it was like, okay, um, but I better get in touch with Dave and see if we can do something for
Yeah,
pre-event.
but I mean, I've got to say, one of the biggest jumps on the pricing, I think, was Apple Arcade actually. So maybe there is something to that. Maybe there is a reason that that's increasing more than some of the other stuff. Because things like Fitness Plus, Apple Music, not getting any increases at this point. Apple TV, I
That's
think, is
right.
justified now because the level of content that's on there, although it's
Mhm.
still not as deep of a library as a lot of other services, there's a lot of content there now, and I don't think there's anything that's actually like bad. Like everything has got like a level of quality to it on Apple TV Plus, and I know this is your sphere of expertise, but there just doesn't seem to be any like filler, really.
I'd agree, and actually what's coming up as well, I don't know if you've seen Killers of the Flower Moon in theaters.
I haven't yet.
Obviously that's gonna come to streaming, but I highly, highly recommend anyone that just loves cinema to go and see it on the best and biggest screen that you can, because there is a big difference in seeing a director of Martin Scorsese's caliber. There are some really fun shows and films coming up though. This week we have Fingernails, which is a comedy sci-fi in the mold of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. There's a sci-fi element to it as well, where basically people test their love by ripping out a fingernail and having it tested against someone else. But it's very,
This,
very funny. It's got Riz Ahmed is in it, amongst others. Really, it's great. I know I've put you off by that, but it's
yeah,
so good.
sounds
For all mankind,
awful.
the, the next season of For All Mankind, everyone's getting a
That's
bit
my
older.
jam.
I know. We have Monarch Legacy of Monsters, the Godzilla spin-off, which is a lot of fun. John Goodman's in it as well, so
Oh,
love a bit of
have you already
fun.
had screeners for this? Is
Yes,
something you've
and we'll be
seen a bit
talking
of?
about it
Yeah.
on the podcast when we're allowed,
Hmm.
um, or over on Magic Rays of Light. And then, in January is what I'm really, really excited for. Masters of the Air, which is the follow-up to Banner Brothers and the Pacific.
I
Um,
did think you were going to say Masters of the Universe. Then I thought we were getting a He-Man series.
we are not.
So
We'll
I'm
leave that to
mildly
Netflix.
disappointed by that.
No, Masters of the Air is actually Apple's first Apple Studio production, heralded by Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, who produced Band of Brothers and The Pacific
They're all
for
right.
HBO. This is going to be huge. Cannot wait. I'm so excited. You're not going to dampen my excitement for that. And then, of course, Napoleon is coming out
Mhm.
later this month in theaters, and I'd imagine at the very tail end of this year, streaming from Ridley Scott. The first time Ridley Scott and Joaquin Phoenix have got back together since Gladiator. So again, you know, the names are fantastic, but um, the opportunities behind the scenes that come to people from um, different backgrounds, and there is something beyond what you see on the screen that's coming together across all of these productions. Of course, I could go on about Apple original series forever. We have literally got 7 minutes until this screen starts doing something and we all rush away.
And we have to turn it off really quickly before we get copyright struck.
Absolutely.
But no, it's very exciting. No, I'm really looking forward to Napoleon. That's one that, like, the trailers for that just look incredible. But yeah, for All Mankind, I'm definitely going to be watching that as we go along. I was catching up actually before we jumped on here with the morning show, which I've been very much enjoying. Been watching that all the way through. Bit of a shame about Jon Stewart departing from Apple TV Plus, from the sounds of things. But I guess there is. I mean, it's interesting because it's almost the storyline of what's been going on in the morning show, where there's the conflicts of interest between the owners of the station and what could happen in terms of.
So the initial reporting from the New York Times on this was that there was this big like squabble and conflict of interest, and I wanted to talk about China and AI, and Apple didn't want that. I actually think there was probably more to the fact that Apple bringing in these different bringing in the higher prices, I think, means that we will eventually see an advertising tier, and that's where there may be a conflict of interest. I don't think it's necessarily Apple not wanting Jon Stewart to talk about certain things, because although that happens in media all the time, so it's not something you would just remove the possibility of. But I think bringing in an ad tier, which I think we will get eventually, will be the main reason. And also, I'll be quite honest, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way here. As people in the UK, I love myself some social media, but not during US election time. It's unbearable. And I'm not too sure if that's the kind of content that I want as part of my subscription, given that this is like an international service, right? This is the first global streaming service. HBO Max is in a few places and has versions of in places in Europe and whatnot.
Yeah,
Apple TV
Disney Plus might be the other one that's pretty close.
Well, I mean, Disney Plus was, but they've just removed the service from India. That's no longer the case. And they're trying to cut different deals in different markets. So they're not as international and global as Apple TV Plus, which will be a surprise, right? To many,
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely.
What's this? Very quickly, Amjad says they're getting the price rise in before some big blockbusters and TV shows, including the Monsterverse stuff and Masters of the Air. I'd agree, but the thing I would say is we are going to be reeling from this strike for a while. There are some shows that were ready to go. For example, Lessons in Chemistry, which just came out this couple weeks ago. It's fantastic. That's been ready to go since the summer. I think that got delayed a little bit. There are some other shows like Palm Royale, which have been available to the press for a long, long time, haven't yet got release date. So you're going to see maybe a staggered release of certain stuff. And then you've got stuff like Sugar with Colin Farrell coming. There's loads. And for the Swiftie fans out there, there's a conspiracy about Argyle. I don't know if you've seen the trailer for Argyle.
I have.
It's incredible. It was such a surprise. Cannot wait.
Yeah.
All right. Got 2 minutes. I'm going to shut up for a moment and let you wind things up, I guess.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know, yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure because I normally do these things solo. So I'm just kind of chatting with the live chat, but it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. As I say, I will be jumping back on a bit of a live stream later, Sigmund. The I guess the link will still be the same. I will
Sure.
throw you a new one if needs be. Evan just turns up at the last minute for me to say goodbye to everyone. Thanks, Evan. Perfect timing, my friend. But yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. Sigmund, let everyone know where they can find you on the internet.
Absolutely. You can find me at Sig Judge on X or Twitter. You can also find me on Mastodon, which is where you'll find a little bit more in-depth thoughts and analysis from me. Screentimes.net is currently down, but it will be back up soon with a relaunch. And Magic Rays of Light, a weekly podcast dedicated to Apple TV. This week, an hour and a half talking about the new TV app, along with special guest of sequel, Roman
Things are
Lafavere.
changing. Things are changing behind you.
Oh my God.
Guys, go and watch the thing. We'll see you again later. Thanks so much,
Absolutely.
Sigmund. Cheers, everyone. Enjoy the show.